Good morning and welcome to Daybreak. I'm your host, Bakhtiar Sanov, and let's begin with the headlines. US President Donald Trump extends pause on strikes against Iranian energy plants. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky visits Saudi Arabia as Kyiv offers drone defense help in Middle East. And former Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro appears in New York court as a judge refuses to dismiss criminal charges against him. With major global stories, US President Donald Trump has announced a pause in attacks on Iran's energy infrastructure on Thursday as diplomatic efforts continue. The move comes amid ongoing negotiations and rising tensions across the region.
US President Donald Trump said he is pausing attacks on Iran's energy infrastructure for 10 days, adding that negotiations with Tehran are progressing well. Speaking at a cabinet meeting, Trump said the pause followed what he described as a request from Iran, while noting that discussions remain ongoing. He also pointed to what he called a goodwill gesture, saying Iran allowed 10 oil tankers to transit the Strait of Hormuz during talks.
They said to show you the fact that we're real and solid and we're there. We're going to let you have 8 boats of oil, 8 boats, 8 big boats of oil. This was 2 days ago. And they'll sail up tomorrow. That was 3 days ago. And I didn't think much about it. And then I watched the news, and they said, a very good anchor, actually. Happened to be Fox. But I watched it, and he said, something's unusual happening. There are 8 boats that are going right up the middle of the Hormuz Strait. 8 big tankers are going loaded up with oil right through. And I said, well, I guess they were right, and they were real. And I think they were Pakistani flagged. Yes. And I said, well, I guess we're dealing with the right people. And actually, they then apologized for something they said, and they said, we're going to send 2 more boats.
Trump said the development indicated a level of engagement between the two sides, while warning that Tehran must reach an agreement or face continued pressure. Meanwhile, Iran has submitted its formal response to a US-proposed 15-point ceasefire plan through intermediaries and is awaiting Washington's reply, according to Iran's semi-official Tasnim news agency. The response was delivered via mediating countries, as indirect contacts between the two sides continue, including message exchanges facilitated by Pakistan. Trump has also warned that Iran must get serious in negotiations after Tehran rejected an earlier version of the proposal. Despite the diplomatic exchanges, hostilities have continued across the region. Air raid sirens sounded across Tel Aviv early Friday, as Israeli authorities warned of incoming threats following multiple waves of Iranian missile strikes targeting cities including Tel Aviv and Haifa.
Staying on this topic, during the cabinet meeting, US President Donald Trump has criticized NATO, questioning the alliance's support for Washington. He also criticized members for failing to meet defense spending commitments.
So thank you to the incredible members of my cabinet. They're doing a phenomenal job. One thing, we're very disappointed, I'll say it publicly, we're very disappointed with NATO because NATO has done absolutely nothing. And I've always said, 25 years ago, I mean, I was somebody that wasn't a politician, but I was always involved in politics and I understood politics. I said 25 years ago that NATO's a paper tiger, but more importantly, that we'll come to their rescue, but they will never come to ours. And I want you to remember that we said this. They didn't come to our rescue. Now they all want to help. When they're annihilated, the other side is annihilated, they said, we'd love to send ships. They actually made a statement, a couple of them, that we want to get involved when the war's over. No, it's supposed to get involved when the war's beginning. or even before it begins, including us. You know why? Because
For more on this story, officials in Washington, D.C. are considering a major military buildup in the Middle East. The United States is weighing the deployment of up to 10,000 additional troops as tensions with Iran continue, with a final decision expected in the coming days. Our correspondent Ubi Shibander has more.
10,000 additional combat troops may be deployed to the Middle East, according to the latest plan being considered by the White House and military planners in the Pentagon. This could be another indicator that the Trump administration is seriously considering a ground operation as part of the ongoing Iran war if peace negotiations fail. Officials in Washington believe that the final decision will be made sometime next week on whether to move forward with the significant surge in ground troops. President Trump is not believed to have made a final decision as of yet whether to escalate to this next phase. More reinforcements, including several fighter jet squadrons and thousands of troops, are expected to arrive in the Middle East in the coming days and weeks. One Marine Expeditionary Unit will arrive this week, and another is now deploying to the region. Speaking to reporters earlier on Thursday, President Trump said that Iran now has the chance to permanently abandon their nuclear ambitions. But if they do not, the United States will continue to destroy Iran's military infrastructure. The Pentagon has reportedly offered a number of options for President Trump, including invading or blocking Kharg Island, Iran's main oil export hub, or seizing the islands of Larak and Abu Musa, which would effectively control key shipping lanes in the Strait of Hormuz. U.S. Central Command also announced the elimination of the Iranian Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy commander due to an Israeli airstrike. The U.S. military said that the naval forces that he commanded had attacked hundreds of vessels with one-way attack drones and missiles. Meanwhile, to give talks a chance to succeed, President Trump announced that he is giving Iran until April 6 before reinstating attacks on Iran's energy infrastructure. Trump stated that the ongoing talks with Iran were, quote, going very well. According to fresh reporting by Axios, some of President Trump's advisors are counseling that a final blow that would crush Iran's military will be required to achieve additional leverage with Tehran. Ubi Shibander, A News, Washington.
Now let's go to the stories making the front pages this morning. First, we go to our A News website. Trump delays Iran bombing deadline to April 6 as Tehran rejects 15-point peace plan. Donald Trump has delayed a potential strike on Iran's energy infrastructure, extending his deadline by another 10 days. The move comes as Washington points to what it describes as progress in ongoing efforts to end the war, marking the second time the president has postponed military action. And meanwhile, France is stepping up post-war planning. Armed Forces Chief Fabien Mandon has held talks with representatives from around 35 countries and exploring options for a multinational mission to reopen the strategically vital Strait of Hormuz once the conflict subsides. Back in Washington, divisions are emerging within Trump's own party. Republican Congresswoman Nancy Mace says she is likely to support a Democratic resolution aimed at limiting the president's authority to wage a further war against Iran. Mace warned against prolonged conflict, saying she has yet to see a clear exit strategy and cautioning against what she described as the risk of a 20-year-plus endless war. And also, European Council President Antonio Costa has also called for immediate de-escalation, reaffirming European Union solidarity with Israel while urging all sides to step back from further confrontation. And now we go to BBC. And rapper-turned-politician Balendra Shah is set to become Nepal's prime minister after a landslide election victory, signaling a major shift in the country's politics. His anti-corruption message and outsider appeal resonated strongly with voters frustrated by elite rule and nepotism. Known as Belen, Shah rose from Nepal's underground rap scene, where he criticized social injustice to political prominence, first winning the mayoral race in Kathmandu in 2022. His tenure focused on urban cleanup, heritage preservation and tackling corruption, though some policies sparked controversy. And now we continue with The Guardian. Nicolas Maduro appears again in New York court on narco-terrorism charges on Thursday in a Manhattan federal court as he faces rare narco-terrorism charges in the United States. The hearing in New York focused on a fierce legal dispute over whether Maduro should be allowed to use frozen Venezuelan government funds to pay for his defense, a request his lawyers say is essential to protect his constitutional rights. While U.S. prosecutors argue national security concerns justify the block, Maduro and his wife Celia Flores were captured on January 3rd during a controversial U.S. Special Forces operation in Caracas that left many dead and sparked international debate. Both have pleaded not guilty to all charges, including narco-terrorism and related drug trafficking and weapons offenses. That's your press roundup for this morning. After the break, we'll be taking a deeper look at the rest of the global stories with more analysis, context and updates from around the world.
Inside Politics delves deeply into the heart of global issues shaping our world today. Join me for your go-to source of political analysis from across the region and beyond.
Welcome to A News, unfiltered news and analysis from the region and beyond. From Washington to Beijing, Tehran to Kabul, to Tbilisi to Tashkent.
Hello, I'm Jay. That challenges.
Today is the third.
We're with you 24/7, taking you live to the front lines of the day's biggest stories.
Welcome to Gabala. One important note to fear. I'm here.
Azerbaijan and Armenia.
Hello, we are recording on the 8th of November.
Reporting from Paris,
Dar es Salaam, Tel Aviv,
Washington,
London,
Moscow,
Kiev, Berlin,
Rio de Janeiro, Beijing, Bangkok, Tbilisi, Tashkent,
Almaty, Kazakhstan,
Port Sudan, Tehran, Islamabad, Istanbul,
Kabul, for A News.
Welcome back. You're watching Daybreak. Now let's have a look at the global stories. Cross-border strikes between Israel and Hezbollah are intensifying, with Israel moving towards creating a buffer zone inside southern Lebanon.
Tensions are escalating along the Israel-Lebanon border. Missiles were fired from Lebanon towards northern Israel just after midnight on Friday, with Israeli defense systems intercepting several. Authorities report no casualties from the latest barrage. In Beirut's southern suburbs, an airstrike involving 3 missiles struck a building overnight, with explosions heard and smoke rising across the area. Meanwhile, in southern Lebanon, the Israeli military says 2 soldiers were killed during clashes with Hezbollah forces along the border. Israel has announced plans to establish a buffer zone south of the Litani River, aiming to push Hezbollah further from its border. Troops have moved into the area, building fortifications and demolishing homes in evacuated villages. Defense Minister Israel Katz says the military will maintain control of key crossings and the security zone as long as threats persist. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu describes the operation as an expansion of an existing security strip to protect northern communities. Hezbollah has warned it will resist any long-term presence, calling the plan an existential threat to Lebanon.
Ukraine is stepping up its outreach to the Middle East as President Volodymyr Zelensky visits Saudi Arabia for talks on security cooperation. Zelensky says important meetings are planned as Kiev seeks closer ties with regional partners. Ukraine is offering air defense and battle-tested drone interceptor technology known for being low-cost and effective, while seeking financial and technological support in return. Ukrainian expert teams are already working with partners in Qatar, the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia. The visit comes as Ukraine faces a potential new Russian offensive and stalled peace talks. The European Parliament has backed legislation to implement the EU's side of a trade agreement with the United States after a month of tariff uncertainty. Lawmakers voted strongly in favor while adding safeguards over concerns Washington may not fully honor the deal. The measures include removing EU duties on U.S. industrial goods and improving access for American agricultural products. They also extend zero tariffs on U.S. bolster imports, first agreed in 2020. The process now moves to negotiations between Parliament and EU member states. A final vote is expected in the coming month.
Vote is closed.
France has responded to criticism over its decision to exclude South Africa from the upcoming G7 summit. Foreign Minister Jean-Noël Barrot said Paris acted on its own, dismissing suggestions of external influence. The move comes after reports that Washington opposed South America's participation.
We have always relied on South Africa and we respect the important role it plays in international affairs. As far as the G7 is concerned, we chose to invite Kenya to Evian in recognition of the work we are doing together to prepare the Africa Forward Summit, the Africa-France Summit that will take place on May 11th and 12th in Nairobi. We did not give in to any pressure. Rather, we made a choice consistent with our decision to keep the G7 streamlined and focused on geo-economic issues. We naturally remain in close contact with South Africa, which continues to be an essential partner of France on all major global issues.
Rising energy prices and global trade disruptions are hitting the UK hard, with the OECD warning of a sharp slowdown as households and businesses face increasing strain. Our correspondent Zainab Farezadeh has more.
The UK economy is expected to be among the hardest hit by the ongoing Middle East conflict, according to new analysis by the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. It warns that rising energy prices and disruption to global trade are already pushing inflation higher and a slowing growth following the war in Iran. Britain is seen as particularly vulnerable because of its reliance on imported fuel and international markets. The OECD says the UK is likely to face a sharp economic slowdown than other major economies, with weaker business investment and a fragile jobs market already adding pressure before the conflict escalated. Across Europe, countries such as France, Germany and Italy are expected to see a more limited impact, as they are less exposed to rising energy costs. The organization warns that the longer the conflict continues, the greater the risk to economic stability, with higher energy prices pushing up costs for businesses and households. Oil prices have surged, rising from around $60 a barrel in January to close to $100. The spike has been driven in part by disruption to the Strait of Hormuz, a critical shipping route for a fifth of the world's oil supply. The OECD says the American economy is likely to grow faster than expected, supported by stronger demand for US oil and lower import tariffs. Also, the US economy is expected to remain relatively resilient. Rising fuel costs are set to hit household incomes and business profits, a pattern also seen in countries including the UK, Turkey, Brazil, and Mexico. In Westminster, the government says it is working to strengthen the economy and protect households, but with no clear end to the conflict. Analysts warn the risk remain firmly to the downside. The OECD has downgraded UK growth to just 0.7% this year, down from previous forecasts compared with 1.3% growth last year. Jennifer is at A News, Manchester, United Kingdom.
G7 foreign ministers meet in France for a second day, with Ukraine and Iran dominating the agenda. Western officials are raising concerns over alleged cooperation between Russia and Iran, while diplomatic uncertainty grows under Donald Trump's foreign policy approach. Meanwhile, urgent funding is being discussed to repair the damaged protective shield at Chernobyl nuclear power plant, highlighting ongoing risks from the war in Ukraine. Joining us now is Osama Rizvi, founder of Rizvi Insights, speaking to us from Lahore, Pakistan. Mr. Rizvi, welcome and good morning.
Good morning to you as well. Thank you.
So, Mr. Rizvi, how credible are the allegations that Russia is providing military support to Iran in the current conflict?
Well, at this point, we will only have to what the official organizations or official announcements say. In that regard, I do not see anything that confirms the involvement, or for that matter, help or assist.
It looks like, Mr. Rizvi, can you hear me?
Sorry, it's always...
The viewer has gone, so you may continue.
Yes, so I think it's always easier to make conjectures and think about these things. If confirmed, there are reports that there have been intelligence sharing mechanisms by China and Russia, by the virtue of which Iran's strike have been so much precise, but once again confirm it.
So, Mr. Rizvi, how might the United States respond if these claims? What would Moscow gain strategically by assisting Tehran at this stage?
I mean, if we look at it from a geopolitical perspective, a wider 30,000 feet perspective, we need to realize that the world is, every passing day, it's getting divided into two hemispheres, Eastern Hemisphere and the Western Hemisphere. I'm talking about in the diplomatic sense. And if Russia and China are to provide some sort of support to Iran, they are, of course, ensuring that their neighboring countries, what is called the periphery, it isn't yielded to a country that maybe does not align with their own ideas and also opposes the economic, diplomatic, and otherwise expansion of both Russia and China. So it's at the 30,000 feet view, at a wider view, you see that this is a part of a great strategy, and we will continue to see this happening, unfortunately, because this happens to be a salient feature of geopolitics. Only that after 2025, we are seeing an intensification of this.
So how might the United States respond if these claims are confirmed?
We are right now seeing a real life war, right? And even then, the options to respond are limited. There won't be much of that which the US can do, because doing so would open another military front. We need to also remind ourselves that with China, the US already has an economic war going on, trade war. It has gone in sort of a background because of Iran war, but once hopefully this is over as soon as possible, we will have another economic war waiting for us. So opening another with Russia, with whom US has already imposed sanctions, and then now desanctioned the oil, helping unintentionally Russian oil and gas revenues. I think it'll be a mess. So if I am in the US administration, I would be avoiding further trouble and focusing more on the domestic economy that seems to be in shambles, at least at the consumer level.
So turning to Ukraine, how significant is the damage to the Chernobyl protective shield?
I think I've been reading about this as well. One thing that we need to realize with the nuclear reactors, and one of the reasons that they have been so controversial throughout the modern history, is this high risk ratio. Experts say, I'm not a nuclear expert, of course, but experts say it is significant. However, at this point, it can be repaired as well. But this also goes on to show something very important, because in South Korea, for instance, as we speak right now, they are now reoperationalizing almost 19 units. They're trying to increase the capacity from 60% to 80%. Similarly, France, of course, is a champion of nuclear energy, but does it serve as a good model for the future and shifting towards renewable energy, nuclear being part of that? I would think twice before answering that in yes. So this is a very interesting development in that it will further affect the policy direction of renewables moving forward.
Mr. Rizvi, what do you think? Can the G7 mobilize 500 million euros for the repair of the Chernobyl protective shield?
For this, we have to look at what is happening in their economies, right? Right now, as with the whole world, the oil and gas price surge is hitting also Europe very hard. We also know that in terms of the gas inventory levels, which has to be at 80%, they are right now at 30%. It's good that it's not winters, otherwise they would have been in far more trouble. But that is one thing. I think that the revenues are going to take a hit. Deficits are going to rise. Interest rates, we already know this is one of the most important repercussions of this, that interest rates are also going to rise right across Europe. So that is going to make some challenging conditions for the G7 to sort of pull together all of these 500 million euros. But that's not impossible. However, it's going to prove challenging.
Mr. Rizvi, how do these two parallel crises, Ukraine and Iran, are shaping the global geopolitical priorities?
Well, that's a very interesting question. In terms of Ukraine, we need to realize that it's a sort of a crisis that has already been discounted in not only in the markets, but also in our collective psychology. It's an ongoing conflict. Every now and then we do hear a surge in strikes, such as an oil depot is hit, such as a refinery is hit. That causes temporary spikes in energy prices, and that, of course, affects the whole world. But what is more significant right now, I believe, is the Iranian conflict. And it has all the potential, unfortunately, to convert into not only a regional war, it already is, but also some sort of a military escalation on a global level, right? And in that way, that hovers at the top of the policymakers and giving them nightmares probably for the next few months until this ends. So that is the biggest consideration right now, because every policy, whether economic, diplomatic, or geopolitical, that is going to be made, it has to consider that these two conflicts are ongoing, and hopefully, let's hope they end very soon.
Osama Rizvi, thank you very much for talking to A News. We are grateful for your insights. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. A federal judge in New York has said he will not dismiss criminal charges against Venezuela's former president Nicolas Maduro over a dispute about legal fees.
A court hearing on Venezuela's former president Nicolas Maduro has taken place in New York. During the one-hour hearing, the US federal judge Alvin Hellerstein said the case against Nicolas Maduro will proceed, rejecting defense arguments that US sanctions are blocking his choice of legal representation. The dispute centers on whether Venezuelan state funds can be used for his defense, with his lawyers saying he lacks the means to pay, while prosecutors argue the restrictions are justified under sanctions and national security concerns. Hellerstein also questioned whether alternative funding options exist and said he will issue a separate ruling on the matter. Maduro and his wife, Celia Flores, have pleaded not guilty to drug trafficking and related charges and remain in custody awaiting trial. In court, Maduro followed proceedings through a translator, took notes, and appeared calmer than at earlier hearings. His lawyer also dismissed reports that Maduro has claimed he was kidnapped, saying such accounts should not be relied upon. Meanwhile, supporters gathered in Caracas calling for his release, as Donald Trump said additional cases could be brought against him. The case is set to continue, with a key ruling on the funding dispute expected in the coming weeks.
Student protests have taken place in Chile's capital, Santiago, over proposed charges to education policy. Tensions have grown over proposals to limit access to free higher education, scrap scholarship programs, and tighten control over state-backed student loans. Crowds gathered near the former National Congress before moving along the Alameda to Plaza Baquedano. Police were deployed in large numbers using water cannons to disperse demonstrators, while some protesters threw objects at security vehicles. No arrests were reported by Thursday evening. The protest was organized by major student groups, including the Confederation of Students of Chile and the Assembly of Secondary Students. Afghan refugees gathered at the Torkham border crossing as Pakistani authorities temporarily reopened the route to allow hundreds to return home. The crossing in northwest Pakistan had been closed for about a month following clashes between the two countries. Some refugees reported delays and difficult conditions as they waited to cross. The reopening comes amid renewed military operations by Pakistan, dampening hopes for a ceasefire after the worst fighting in years. A UK-based space startup is developing satellite technology to monitor the Earth's temperature in unprecedented detail. The system could transform how industries track climate change, energy use, and global activity.
A Cambridge-based space startup is developing satellite technology designed to map the Earth's temperature in high detail. Supersharp Space Systems is building infrared satellites capable of capturing thermal images of the planet at any time of day, offering a new way to monitor global activity.
Taking the temperature of the planet, you can learn the similar things as taking the temperature of a person. We can monitor health, we can monitor energy usage, we can monitor activity. And this is useful across a whole range of sectors. It supports the agricultural industry, looking at crop health and how plants are doing. It supports the building industry, looking at urban heat islands, how efficient buildings are, where we've got heat loss, where we don't have good insulation.
The company says the technology could also enhance security monitoring by identifying unexpected activity through shifts in temperature patterns. The first satellite is expected to launch in 2027, marking a step towards more accessible thermal imaging from space.
Over to a quick break now. When I return, we'll take a look at the regional headlines, where an analyst will be joining me to dig further into some of the key stories. Stay with me.
And welcome to Primetime. What a show we've got lined up for you. In In a complex world, clarity is power. Two hours live, diplomacy dissected in a spin-free environment. That's Prime Time with me, Guy Schoen, weekdays on A News.
Welcome to A News, unfiltered news and analysis from the region and beyond.
From Washington to Beijing, Tehran to Kabul, to Tbilisi to Tashkent. Hello, I'm Jay. That's challenges.
Today is the third.
We're with you 24/7, taking you live to the front lines of the day's biggest stories.
Welcome to Gabala. One important note to fears. I'm here.
Azerbaijan and Armenia.
Hello, we are reporting
Reporting from Paris,
Dar es Salaam, Tel Aviv,
Washington,
London,
Moscow,
Kiev, Berlin,
Rio de Janeiro, Beijing, Bangkok, Tbilisi, Tashkent,
Almaty, Kazakhstan,
Port Sudan, Tehran, Islamabad, Istanbul,
Kabul, for A News.
Welcome back and thank you for joining me this morning. Now let's take a look at the stories impacting the region. At the Boao Forum for Asia Annual Conference 2026, China's top legislator Zhao Leji met officials from Azerbaijan and Kazakhstan to boost cooperation. Our Mahnur Maktoum has more from Beijing.
China's top legislator Zhao Leji has met with visiting officials from Azerbaijan and Kazakhstan, along with members of the Boao Forum for Asia Board of Directors, on the sidelines of the Boao Forum for Asia Annual Conference in Hainan. The meeting focused on strengthening political trust and expanding cooperation amid a shifting global dynamics. During talks with Azerbaijan's parliamentary speaker Sahiba Gafarova and Kazakhstan First Deputy Prime Minister Roman Scholar, Zhao emphasized advancing high-quality Belt and Road cooperation, boosting trade and investment, and deepening legislative and people-to-people exchanges. Both sides also reaffirmed support for closer bilateral ties, with discussions highlighting collaboration in sectors including energy, infrastructure, and economic development. Zhao also held discussions with BFA board members led by Chairman Ban Ki-moon, showing China's support for multilateralism and the forum's role as a platform for international dialogue. Participants expressed readiness to strengthen coordination, promote openness and inclusiveness, and contribute to global cooperation through the continued development of the Boao Forum for Asia. Mani Maktoum, A News, Beijing.
To unpack the broader geopolitical and economic implications of the Boao Forum, we're joined by Andrew K.P. Leung, an international independent China strategist joining us from Hong Kong. Mr. Leung, welcome to the program and good morning. Mr. Leung, good morning.
Yeah.
So let's continue. How significant are Zhao Leji's meetings with Azerbaijan and Kazakhstan in the current geopolitical climate? And is China recalibrating its regional strategy through platforms like the Boao Forum?
Well, there are a number of angles to look at this new stage of Azerbaijan-China relations. The first, of course, was Azerbaijan occupies a very strategic position in the middle corridor, which bypasses a more troublesome route through Russia and yet connects China's manufacturing and production hub with Central Asia and further afield in Europe. So I think that that's a strategic position enables Azerbaijan to play a very important role in this mutual relations. Secondly, I think the Speaker of the National Assembly highlights that Azerbaijan embraces the 4 global initiatives launched by Beijing. Now let's look at these very important global initiatives and why do they matter. The first initiative is called the launched by President Xi a couple of years ago, or even a decade ago, is called the Global Security Initiative. Now that addresses the fundamental problems underlying some of the wars, even the war over Ukraine, the war over Iran, in the sense that countries, especially large, powerful countries, are trying to impose their own security concerns on other nations without regard to the opposite security concern. So I think that this initiative, Global Security Initiative, highlights the importance of the mutual respect of each other's security concerns. Otherwise, the whole world will descend into the law of the jungle. The second initiative is called the Global Development Initiative, in the sense that wars don't solve problems, war create problems, and the peoples around the world, the most important initiative is to improve their livelihood. The basic level, of course, is survival, and then the higher level is quality of life, a better livelihood for their families, for their societies, and that aspirations must be respected rather than being trampled upon on the altar of military aggression. So that's the second initiative, Global Development Initiative. All countries should have a stake in it. The third initiative is called the Global Civilization Initiative. There has been a revival of the rhetoric that somehow the Western nation representing the Caucasian races or the white races have a sense of superiority, and they think that they are a better part of the human race and they can impose their values, their systems on the rest of the world. And that, of course, this kind of rhetoric traces back to even the wars in the middle century, the Crusades, for example. I think that this kind of mindset is totally misguided, because each civilization, especially the long civilizations, the countries which have survived for thousands of years, have their respective ethnic, religious, and cultural and civilizational values, and these values must be mutually respected. The last initiative, and not the least, is the Global Governance Initiative, recently launched, in the sense that as the United Nations is losing its capacity to broker and to mandate a more peaceful world, I think countries should embrace a kind of behavioral conducts, the codes of conduct, how that they should treat each other, how they should govern the stability of firstly within their own country, but also within the region. And then good governance means respect for others' needs and aspirations, rather than imposing one's own will or one's own direction on others, especially their neighbors, and also agreeing on a code of conduct so that especially neighboring countries could live in peace. So I think that these global initiatives have a commonality between Beijing and also Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan, of course, does not want to take sides and form into blocks because the ideal of blocks is no longer feasible. And then it forms partnerships with other countries, including the United States, including Russia, including China. So I think that this speaks to the validity of all these global initiatives. And these initiatives also reflect the world is now changing into a multifaceted world.
So how does energy cooperation shape Azerbaijan-China relations, especially with the shift toward green energy?
The energy, of course, is a lifeblood for the world, their development, not only for Azerbaijan or for China, for many countries around the world. And you can see from what happened over the Ukraine, the Iran war, the disruption of energy supplies is now affecting the livelihood and stability of all countries around the world. And I think that the war in Iran is beginning to have very good lessons for countries including Azerbaijan and China and other countries in the sense of their own energy security. Now, how to make sure that their supply of energy is not affected by external factors beyond their control. How to attain a greater degree of self-sufficiency. China is a very good example because as much as something like 40% of China's electricity supply now is now being accounted for renewable energy. Now, renewable energy is not just about blue skies and clean waters, is national energy security because renewables are all produced within one's own country. So I think that with this disruption of energy supplies around the world because of the Iran war, more countries are going to think about embracing renewable energy. And of course, in terms of the supply in the Middle East, after all, the Middle East is still a major source of oil, and the transit through the Strait of Hormuz is now being, I think it's likely to be rethought. How to diversify the supply, maybe through pipelines. And of course, China's Belt and Road Initiative already embrace this dimension. There are lots of pipelines from Central Asia, passing through Central Asia, connecting with the Middle East to China and to and through countries like Pakistan and to other end users. So I think that this diversification of supply routes is again up for reconsideration. I think that not necessarily just after the war, but right now, because many countries are extremely throttled, by this sudden disruption of their lifeblood, economic lifeblood, which is, of course, the energy supplies.
Mr. Leung, thank you very much for your insights and for joining us from Hong Kong. We truly appreciate your time and analysis. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now to Afghanistan, where regional cooperation on water management was highlighted at a major ministerial forum in Central Asia. Officials emphasized fair water distribution and joint action on climate challenges. Now, correspondent Tamim Bahis has the details from Kabul.
Afghanistan's Ministry of Water and Energy says Deputy Minister for Water Mujibur Rahman Omar Akhundzada addressed the main ministerial level Water Week Forum in Tashkent, Uzbekistan on behalf of Afghanistan. In his meeting, he stressed the importance of a fair water distribution between Afghanistan and Central Asian countries, strengthening water diplomacy and adopting modern technologies for improved water management. He also underlined the need for joint regional cooperation to address the impacts of climate change, particularly on shared water resources. The Deputy Minister spoke about preventing the degradation of the banks of the Amu River, noting that Afghanistan remains committed to respecting the water rights of neighboring countries. On the sideline of the forum, Akhundzada met with Uzbekistan's Minister of Water, Shavkat Kamrayev, where the two sides discussed expanding bilateral cooperation in the water sector. Officials say Afghanistan's participation in the forum is considered an important step toward strengthening the country's active role in regional and international discussions, while opening a new chapter for cooperation on water management and shared environmental challenges. Tamim Bahiz in Kabul, A News.
Iran says it has alerted global and regional bodies to the civilian toll from the Israel-US conflict. Our Turaj Shirelilo has more from Tehran.
The vice president of the Iranian Red Crescent Society for International Affairs and Humanitarian Law says Iran has reached out to regional and international bodies to report the massive scale of the civilian casualties and destructions caused by the Israel-US war on Iran. As the conflict is becoming 4 weeks old, Dr. Razieh Ali Shavandi told A News in an exclusive interview that Iran's Red Crescent has contacted the World Health Organization and the International Committee of Red Cross and made 20 official communications with the International Criminal Court about intentional violations of international humanitarian law and killing of civilians, including medical staff and aid workers. The vice president of Iran's Red Crescent Society also praised the humanitarian support from international organizations, neighboring and regional countries, as well as the NGOs.
Within the framework of international humanitarian law diplomacy, Iran's Red Crescent has been receiving international aid coordinated by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The donor countries include Russia, Azerbaijan, Turkmenistan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Iraq, India, and China. They have been sending medicine, medical equipment, relief items, as well as food, which were distributed among the war-stricken people.
Turaj Shirelilo from Iran Red Crescent Center in Tehran for A News.
Georgia's Prime Minister Irakli Kobakhidze says the country will not impose sanctions on Russia, but insists it will not also allow them to be bypassed through its territory. His comments come as tensions with the European Union continue over Tbilisi's stance on sanctions. Our Nini Nikolashvili has more.
Georgian Prime Minister Irakli Kobakhidze says the government is following a clear and principled policy on Russia-related sanctions, refusing to impose them but also not allowing them to be bypassed through Georgian territory. He emphasized that this approach is guided by national interests, noting that imposing sanctions could have significant economic consequences for Georgian citizens, including farmers and exporters. At the same time, he stressed that authorities strictly monitor trade and logistics to prevent any violations of international restrictions. His remarks come against the backdrop of growing tension with the European Union, which has adopted multiple rounds of sanctions against Russia since the start of the war in Ukraine. The issue gained renewed attention in recent weeks as the European Union prepared its 20th sanctions package. For the first time, the proposal included measures targeting infrastructure in third countries, among them Georgia's Black Sea Olavi oil terminal. The draft would have restricted EU companies and individuals from engaging in transactions with the port amid concerns over potential links to Russian oil transport. Georgian authorities strongly rejected these concerns. Kobakhidze stated that allegations of sanctions circumvention are unfounded and that Georgia has acted responsibly throughout the process. He added that the government provided assurances to European partners that sanctioned vessels would not be serviced in Georgian ports. Kobakhidze has criticized what he describes as double standards from European institutions, arguing that while Georgia faces pressure to impose sanctions, trade between EU countries and Russia continues at significant levels. Following those developments and consultations, the European Union ultimately did not include the Olavi oil terminal in the final version of the 20th sanctions package. However, monitoring of compliance is expected to continue. Nini Nikolashvili, Tbilisi, A News.
Washington's iconic cherry blossoms have reached peak bloom, drawing large crowds to the tidal basin. The annual display remains a powerful symbol of friendship between Japan and the United
Thousands of visitors gathered around Washington's tidal basin as the city's famous cherry trees reached peak bloom. The blossoms, first gifted by Japan in 1912, have become a lasting symbol of diplomatic ties between the two countries. Each year, the pink and white flowers attract tourists from around the world, as well as locals returning to a familiar tradition.
I love cherry blossoms, and I have cherry blossoms in my house, and when they start popping, I know that the tidal basin will start popping. So that's how I predict the peak bloom. But other than that, I'm here every year.
It's a kind of a gift from Japan, right? So it's a kind of a nature, different kind of a nations all together. So that's kind of a integration for me. So I think that makes me, wow, thinking about all those things could be working together.
The trees stretch across the tidal basin, East Potomac Park and the waterfront, creating one of the capital's most recognizable spring scenes. Officials say the blossoms continue to carry diplomatic meaning, with new plans announced to plant additional trees along the Potomac River. The bloom also delivers a seasonal boost to tourism as visitors gather to celebrate both nature and a century-old symbol of friendship.
Thank you for watching Daybreak with me, Bakhtiar Salov. Have a nice day and stay with us.